the past that allow them to do so. They don't have big residuals that come in on a regular basis.
Behind the wooden doors of a quiet courtroom, something unexpected was unfolding. Prince Harry was reportedly left furious after a judge publicly revealed findings that pointed to a hidden plan allegedly linked to Meghan Markle. According to documents brought to light, court observers say the judge's comments focused on patterns of behavior, timing of key decisions, and strategic messaging. So what exactly did the judge uncover? Was this truly a secret strategy to manipulate the monarchy? Join us as we uncover Prince Harry's shocking reaction to a judge's revelation about Meghan. Courtroom moment that shattered Harry's world. Judge Thornbury had given a warning earlier that morning. She told everyone in the courtroom that the messages about to be read were disturbing, not because they used shocking words or violent images, but because of what they suggested. They didn't just tell a different version of events, they described a completely different woman. This was not the picture of a fragile duchess chased away by a cruel press and a cold royal system. Instead, the messages painted her as careful, calculating, and strategic. Not a victim, but a planner. Not someone overwhelmed, but someone managing a brand. And not just any brand. This was one of the most dramatic personal reinventions the world had seen in years. The judge did not raise her voice. She did not pause for effect. She simply read the words. But she didn't need drama. The words were heavy enough on their own. Make sure he tears up when discussing Diana. The sentence hung in the air. It was short, direct, cold. The meaning was impossible to ignore. The deep grief Harry believed he had shared openly, the pain he had carried since he was a boy walking behind his mother's coffin, might not have been fully his own in those public moments. It may have been guided, planned, shaped, not for healing, but for headlines. Not for closure, but for coverage. His most personal sorrow, the wound that had defined his life, was being described like a media strategy. The judge continued reading, but no one was really listening anymore. All eyes turned to Harry. His tears were not loud. He didn't sob or cry out, but the silence around him made every small movement feel enormous. His shoulders rose and fell slowly, like waves hitting a rocky shore. Each breath seemed heavy. Each quiet sniffle echoed across the courtroom. At that moment, he was not Prince Harry. He was not a public figure, not a headline, not a symbol. He was simply a man whose heart was breaking in front of the world. Security stepped closer. His lawyer quickly stood and asked for a short break, saying his client was emotionally overwhelmed. But Judge Thornbury, steady and committed to procedure, shook her head. "The presentation must continue uninterrupted," she said calmly. Yet even her voice sounded thinner now, as if the weight of the moment had reached her too. In the gallery, reporters forgot the rules. Phones were supposed to be off. They weren't. Fingers flew across screens. Messages were sent to editors. Headlines began forming instantly. Prince Harry breaks down in court. The text that changed everything. "Make him cry!" Outside the building, crowds started to gather. News alerts buzzed across social media. What had been a slow and steady legal case suddenly exploded into a global spectacle. Inside, Harry remained still, silent, almost frozen. What hurt most wasn't only the idea that the public might have been manipulated, it was the thought that he might have been manipulated too, that his emotions, his story, even his mother's memory may have been shaped for effect. And if that had been managed, what hadn't? That question opened a deep and frightening space inside him, a space where trust began to crumble. And in that crack, something larger began to fall apart. Not just a court case, but a marriage, a movement, a carefully built myth. From the moment the judge read the words, "Make him tear up" when discussing Diana, time seemed to change. It no longer moved normally. It stretched, it trembled, it lived in the silence between breaths, in the space between one line of text and the next. What followed did not feel like a simple courtroom session. It felt like watching someone unravel in real time. For 4 long hours, Harry did not speak. He sat in the witness box, his face red, his eyes swollen, his hands shaking slightly in his lap. The defense team kept presenting messages, page after page, timestamp after timestamp. Each one landed like a quiet blow. Some texts were blunt, others were subtle, but together they built a picture that was hard to ignore, a picture of control, planning, and emotional strategy. One message reportedly described a private family dinner as a goldmine of reactive content. Another talked about baking empathy into Harry's next public appearance. He wears grief like silk. We just need the right lighting, one text read. The room went completely still. Even the sound of someone writing notes felt too loud. Reporters who had covered wars, scandals, and political corruption sat frozen, mouths slightly open. No one had expected this level of detail. No one had expected this many messages, and certainly not this tone. So what secret was actually revealed in the courtroom? Let's find out. The courtroom confessions. The court had moved into evidentiary phase 2, a section the defense had dubbed narrative construction and manipulation. In simpler terms, it was the part where they laid bare how stories had been shaped, word by word. It started with messages about Harry's earliest therapy revelations, shared during the Oprah interview. Meghan's texts analyzed every phrase like a director dissecting an actor's performance. That line about being trapped in the system perfect, one note read. But next time, pause longer before I couldn't even call my grandmother. It needs breathing space. There were even full paragraphs copied almost exactly from their interviews, traced back to Meghan's drafts, marked with asterisks. Insert breath here for emotion. Look down and rub fingers when saying, "My brother stopped taking my calls." Each tiny note chipped away at what once seemed sacred. Harry shifted in his seat. First, his back stiffened. Then he slouched. Finally, he sank entirely. At one point, he rubbed his face so hard red streaks marked his cheeks. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something urgent. But Harry didn't respond. He looked like a man trying to crawl out of his own skin. By the 2-hour mark, the courtroom felt suffocating, thick with tension, disbelief, and a quiet that pressed on everyone's chest. Then, the judge read a message that silenced even the lawyers. He still wants their approval. It's pathetic, but I can use it. The guilt over his mother makes him easy to redirect. That's the engine. We're 7. Somewhere in the back, a whisper broke through. Jesus Christ! Harry flinched. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes, then opened them slowly, hollowly, as if something inside had gone dark, as if a flame had been snuffed out. His security exchanged tense glances, hands inching toward water bottles and protective gear, but they didn't move. He was pale, trembling. A palace aide later said he looked as though he'd forgotten how to inhabit his own body. The judge asked if he wanted a break. He didn't speak. He simply nodded, a nod that was neither defiance nor defeat, just emptiness. A man whose choices had been stolen by timing, by evidence, by someone he once trusted more than life itself. The recess lasted 30 minutes. When Harry returned, he was physically present, but the light inside him was gone. His gait had slowed. His eyes were red-rimmed. His suit hung off him like borrowed clothing. A lawyer tried to hand him a notepad. He didn't take it. Then the court moved into phase 3, the monetization of royal pain. Messages discussed which childhood memories were still useful, which traumas could be saved for a podcast or a book. Don't waste it all on the first product. Harry's got layers. The abandonment arc is still untapped. Another note. We need a clip of him talking about the Queen's corgis. Nostalgia drives engagement. Harry barely reacted anymore. His hands lay limp. His gaze was fixed on the edge of the witness box. His breathing was shallow. Only the slight twitch of his jaw and the subtle rise and fall of his chest hinted he was still alive inside. The judge noticed. She paused, asked if he needed another break. This time his lawyer spoke. "Yes, Your Honor. He needs a moment. He is not well." Even then, Harry didn't move. Standing might have torn him open. Security guided him out, flanking him like paramedics moving someone with a concussion. Outside, the reaction was immediate. Royal supporters wept, critics were silent. Even skeptics felt a shift. This was no longer about sides or politics. It was about truth, about a man realizing he hadn't just lost privacy. He may have lost his reality. He didn't return for the rest of the day. His empty chair faced the bench like a silent indictment. By then, the story had moved beyond lawsuits, media deals, or palace intrigue. It had become something far deeper, the heartbreak of a man who may have loved and suffered alone. When the court resumed the next morning, the mood had shifted from shock to grim anticipation. No one expected redemption, explanation, or excuses. What the world wanted, what the press demanded, what the public craved was closure. What more had been left unsaid? What other truths were buried beneath carefully crafted kindness and showy displays of vulnerability? Let's take a closer look. Meghan's hidden playbook. Each folder sitting on the defense table carried a label that seemed almost innocent at first glance, yet it cut like a scalpel under the scrutiny of cameras and journalists. 3 words on each folder, stark, clinical, yet terrifying in implication. Category 1, monetization. Category 2, family manipulation. Category 3, emotional exploitation. The first folder opened a window into a side of Meghan that the public had never seen. The defense laid out a string of private messages between her and a close friend in California, covering late 2022 through summer 2024. These weren't scandalous in a tabloid sense. There was no profanity, no shocking confessions, but every word was precise, deliberate, a kind of strategy manual disguised as casual chat. Each message felt like a blueprint, part corporate memo, part psychological calculus. One note broke down potential revenue streams tied to personal narratives. Diana legacy halo plus William equals unresolved tension. Catherine equals comparison vector. Charles equals redemption thread if needed. Us equals survivors, reclaiming identity. Another message labeled their Netflix deal as our pension vehicle, laying out plans to stretch what the defense called the royal trauma arc across 3 projects to maximize long-term profit. Meghan even coined the term trauma fatigue pacing to describe how to time disclosures, so the audience stayed engaged without becoming weary. Merchandising came next. There were ideas for a children's brand built around royal resilience, including a line of plush toys called Archie Bears and a motivational picture book tied to her daughter's name. One message floated the idea of monetizing Lilith's birthday, a controlled photo release tied to charity, reminding the world, we are the future. Bonus points, she noted, if it coincided with a Windsor press cycle. Then came the most audacious note, crisis capital. It detailed how to flip negative press into engagement, framing criticism as bullying or colonial backlash. A line, highlighted in bold red, we don't run from scandals, we alchemize them. As each message was read aloud, what had once seemed spontaneous, emotional, even relatable, now appeared calculated, almost painfully transactional. If Category 1 revealed strategy, Category 2 struck at the heart of morality. These messages exposed private observations about the royal family, not as relatives, but as participants in a high-stakes negotiation. Prince William, for instance, was labeled the real threat, calm, polished anger, loyal to the institution, less emotional than Harry, more dangerous, Meghan wrote. Catherine was called the uncrackable mask, and the texts detailed Meghan's frustrations over failed attempts to provoke a public reaction. There were speculations about Catherine's mental health, marriage, and parenting, phrased so sharply that journalists hesitated to repeat them. One line read, if she cracks in public, even once, it shifts the whole narrative, but she's colder than marble. King Charles was described as sentimental, weak in the right light, and potentially useful for shaping public perception. Guilt over Diana, she noted, could be a lever. Pulled carefully, it might soften the brand. Even the late Queen was woven into these strategies, with draft ideas to use archival footage of young Harry with Elizabeth II to frame their departure as a continuation of her legacy, updated for modern audiences. The final folder, the most devastating, focused inward. These were not public relations notes, not financial projections, but an intimate cataloging of Harry himself, his vulnerabilities, his traumas, his private fears. One text recounted a therapy session in which Harry described recurring tunnel dreams of seeing his mother's face before the crash. Meghan suggested he write it down. Could be a powerful opening to something bigger. Something bigger! Night terrors, helicopter fears, guilt over uniform scandals, Shame from Afghanistan interviews, every detail filed away like cards in an index. And then came the spring 2023 message that silenced the courtroom. Harry had admitted he missed his brother. Meghan wrote, "That's just memory, not reality. Nostalgia lies. Redirect fast." He was drifting. It wasn't conversation. It was control, emotional steering, the careful trimming of connection. As the words hung in the air, Harry's face, pale and still, spoke louder than outrage. He didn't protest. He didn't cry. He only stared, as if the room itself had become a mirror of his own inner exile. What message did Meghan's book contain? Let's find out. Meghan's messages that shake the palace. The moment the courtroom adjourned that day, the walls of silence that had always protected the royal family began to crack, not through public speeches or televised statements, but through small, quiet gestures, muted reactions, carefully phrased comments, and whispers that carried into a world already ablaze with speculation. What happened in London's High Court could no longer stay behind closed doors. The shock from Meghan's private messages spread like cracks across glass, shattering not only public perception but the delicate balance inside the royal household itself. The palace's official response was, as always, restrained. This is a difficult time for all families. Some matters are best resolved privately, with compassion. But what they didn't say, and who actually spoke, was far more revealing. The statement came not from Buckingham Palace, but from Clarence House. In other words, it came from the king. That small detail, overlooked by casual observers but immediately noted by veteran royal watchers, sent a clear message. King Charles was taking control of the story. This was not bureaucracy speaking. This was a father, steady and unsentimental, asserting order. Behind closed doors, sources said the king appeared calm but exhausted. He had been briefed, read the messages, and prepared himself for the impact. A senior aide recalled his first words after reviewing the transcripts. "This is not vengeance. This is gravity." He did not shout. He did not call for retaliation. Instead, he gave one quiet instruction. The household must remain disciplined. No gloating, no leaks, no vindictive comments. "This is not a victory," he reportedly said. "It's a collapse." What hurt him most, insiders said, was not the damage to the institution itself, but how his son had been portrayed as a pawn, a project, a walking PR strategy, with his personal struggles turned into public currency. Charles had long suspected that the Sussex narrative was being carefully shaped, even exaggerated. But reading Meghan's words directly, the way she analyzed his softness, her advice on shaping Harry's affection, pierced even his decades of royal composure. Yet he maintained his outward calm. Privately, though, he paused over one particular message, the one that described Harry's love for him as leverage. He stared at it in silence for nearly a full minute, then closed the folder and walked out. If King Charles grieved quietly, Prince William burned silently. The messages confirmed what he had feared for years. Meghan's presence hadn't just taken Harry physically, but had pulled him emotionally, twisting family bonds into material for a public story. Those close to William said he was furious, not at Meghan, but at Harry. "He let this happen. He handed us over," said one insider. For years, William had kept his composure, refusing to respond publicly as their names were dragged through countless interviews. But now, his anger was raw and real. When he read the message labeling Catherine as the uncrackable mask, he fell silent, then reportedly said that Meghan was trying to break her. He wasn't just angry, he was protective. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, was being treated not as family, but as an obstacle to a narrative. The next morning, William appeared with Catherine at a public event in Cornwall for a mental health initiative. He spoke briefly, calm and collected, but his knuckles gripped the podium tightly. Catherine smiled politely beside him, yet cameras captured the tension in her posture and around her eyes. They didn't mention Harry. There was no need. Catherine had faced scrutiny before, compared endlessly to Diana, criticized for being too perfect, too composed, too controlled. But what Meghan's messages revealed was far more deliberate and malicious. These weren't idle rumors. They were calculated attacks, targeting her motherhood, her marriage, even her mental health. One message floated the idea of leaking whispers about postpartum struggles. Another called her insufferably blank, yet Catherine said nothing. Her silence was not a weakness, it was a shield. Those close to her described her reaction as quietly resolute. She felt the sting personally, but refused to let it define her. After nearly 2 decades of whispers, she had never faced such fully exposed, deliberate attacks. Her response was simple: carry on with grace, with careful dignity, and in the end, that quiet strength proved to be the most powerful statement of all. How did the public respond to Meghan's message? Let's take a closer look. Public opinion shift. Outside the palace walls, the reaction was immediate and ruthless. In the United Kingdom, public opinion turned on a dime. Within 48 hours of the courtroom reading, polls revealed a staggering shift. Sympathy for Harry plummeted to its lowest point since he left royal life, and Meghan's approval ratings fell even further, in some cases into the single digits. Even across the Atlantic in the United States, where the couple had long enjoyed a warmer, more sympathetic audience, the tide began to turn. Morning talk shows that had once hailed their bravery now cast doubt on their motives. Editorials were no longer about heartbreak or resilience, they were about betrayal. Betrayal of family, of trust, of everything the public had been led to believe. Influencers hastily deleted past posts in support. Corporate sponsors hit pause on endorsements. One anonymous Netflix executive was blunt: "We bought a memoir, not a manipulation manual." The shockwaves didn't stop there. Diplomatic channels stirred quietly. British diplomats whispered concerns to their American counterparts about the long-term fallout for royal soft power. Off the record, a European ambassador remarked, "The Crown's power never rested on rules alone. It rested on mystery. That mystery is gone." On social media, the divide was immediate but widening. One camp painted Meghan as the puppet master, orchestrating every moment, turning a grieving prince into a carefully packaged product. The other camp, while defensive, focused on the invasion itself, the raw exposure of private conversations, arguing that the act of release reinforced the very toxicity Meghan had spent her life trying to escape. Yet even her most loyal supporters felt a subtle tremor in conviction. Blind faith gave way to a question that lingered in the air: how much of what we believed was real? Ironically, the legal battle intended to protect privacy had exposed more than any tabloid ever could. And in the aftermath, the damage was unmistakable. A monarchy rattled, but standing. A marriage strained, perhaps irreparably. A prince, once the emblem of modern royal rebellion, adrift in his own life. And a woman, once celebrated as the bold voice of change, now viewed by many as the mastermind behind one of the most intricate and sophisticated media illusions in recent memory. Was it cold calculation or merely instinct for self-preservation? Had Meghan Markle meticulously built an empire of emotion with careful, almost ruthless strategy, or was she simply maneuvering through one of the most unforgiving institutions of our era, relying on whatever tools she thought might keep her alive and unscathed? Let's take a closer look. Meghan's royal struggles. To truly grasp why those now infamous messages exist, we need to dig deep, beyond the headlines, beyond the outrage, into layers of context, ambition, fear, and control. We cannot reduce her to a simple caricature. The woman revealed in those texts was not a villain in a storybook. She was a former actress, a woman of color, a mother, a wife, suddenly thrust into the center of one of the most powerful and scrutinized institutions on the planet, the British monarchy. And she did so while cameras rolled and daggers were metaphorically drawn. Many of the messages that shocked the courtroom, detailing brand plans, monetization strategies, or carefully timed public sympathy, could, if seen differently, be read as defensive maneuvers. In the early days of her royal life, Meghan faced relentless scrutiny. Racially charged headlines, fabricated family drama, aggressive paparazzi, and cold indifference from traditionalist courtiers. Insiders say she received almost no institutional support, left to navigate a centuries-old system that prized protocol over human warmth. In that world, perhaps she took control the only way she knew how. Perhaps those messages weren't born of malice, but of survival. To understand her mindset, one crucial clash must be considered: Hollywood versus Buckingham. In Hollywood, image is everything. Control over the story is survival. Public perception is currency. A perfectly timed emotional beat on camera is not manipulation. It's craft. Media exposure isn't an intrusion. It's a career. In that universe, turning personal pain into a narrative may not feel exploitative. It feels practical. When Meghan suggested releasing birthday photos timed with royal events, she may have seen it as smart, not sinister. When she described Harry's emotional moments as engagement opportunities, she may have believed she was helping him communicate in a system that had long denied him a voice. Seen this way, she wasn't exploiting his pain, she was amplifying it. But Buckingham, and the public it serves, operates differently. Here, the sacred is silent. Feelings are buried. Duty is everything. Any attempt to optimize public engagement around grief is considered sacrilege. And when these two worlds collided, conflict was inevitable. Yet, not everything can be chalked up to cultural differences. Some messages are undeniably disturbing. He said he misses his brother. I told him that's just memory, not reality. Had to redirect fast. He was drifting. Here, we see not strategy, but control. A partner reshaping someone's reality, potentially isolating them from support. That is not cultural friction. That is dominance. Other messages hinted at a long-term plan, not merely to leave the monarchy, but to leverage it. Meghan's text reveals someone highly aware of power dynamics, emotional leverage, and how to craft personal pain into something consumable by the public. And here lies the deepest contradiction. Publicly, Meghan often spoke of being silenced, of losing her voice within the royal system. Yet privately, these messages reveal a woman who was anything but silent. She directed, coached, guided. She was not powerless. She was in command. The line between guiding someone and controlling them is incredibly thin, especially in close relationships. When one person has been hurt in the past and the other is sharp, persuasive, and full of ambition. The messages don't just show Meghan's moves, they show her influence. Harry gave her that influence willingly, perhaps believing she needed it for both their benefit. But in giving her that power, his own story was changed. And when that story came crashing into the courtroom, the man who once thought he was free realized he had been rewritten. So what was Meghan? Was she a master planner or someone just trying to survive? Perhaps she was both. She calculated, yet she felt trapped. She loved, yet she led. She wanted freedom, but in the process, she built an empire made of stories. Stories that may never be seen the same way again. Whatever her intentions, the consequences are real. Now, the world must decide not just whether to believe her, but whether to forgive her. And Harry, he must decide if love without truth is even love at all. So, what do you think about Prince Harry's reaction to the judge's shocking revelation about Meghan's secret plans? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.